Welcome back to the Pastor Pod. We are on episode 47. And if you're new with us, I'm Josh. I'm a pastor at a church in Venice, Florida, the Bridge Church here. And I'm here with my co-host, Jay Mudd, who is a most recent pastor at a church of Southlake in Claremont, Florida. What's up, Jay?
What's up? And you got to remember, you are the pastor at the Bridge Church in Venice, Florida, on the island. On the island, Josh.
Oh my gosh!
I got to enjoy the
just
island
one of the
this past
pastors.
weekend. I got to enjoy the island this weekend.
That's right.
And
you guys went to the
exciting.
beach.
Yeah. And listen, for all those who are listening who are in the Venice area, it was a joy. It really was. And I can now affirm and confirm that Josh really does live on an island. I was at his house and got to go over a bridge, surrounded by water, 3-story house. It's massive. It's massive.
Yeah, that's absolutely incorrect. I don't live on the island.
Josh,
and you were in my house. You were in my house with kids all over the place. No, Jay you did a great job. If you don't know, Jay preached Sunday morning for our services, and then he did a great job leading our men's night. We had over 250 men, and I did a great job sharing the gospel all weekend. So I'm sure you're a little bit tired on Monday. Were you dragging a little bit?
Nah, man. That was a walk in the park, Josh. You pastors who preach every week, I don't. It's easy. Come on. I'm joking. I'm joking.
What are we thinking?
I'm joking. Anyhow, Josh, let's not neglect our friend, our newfound friend. Maybe for me, I just met him, but Josh, Nick. But let's welcome Nick to the podcast. Nick, what's going on, my friend?
Hey, thanks for having me today. My name's Nick. I'm worship and missions pastor in Yulee, Florida, which is as far north as you can get until you hit Georgia. So been here for 6.5 years, and I've known Josh for 12 years.
And Josh, how do you guys know each other? Come on.
Has it been 12 years? That's pretty awesome. Well, Nick, I met Nick. I was a youth pastor at a church in L.A.
Lower Alabama.
That's my one. Yep. That for everyone listening, everyone for that terrible joke. Most people have already turned off the podcast, but for the few that appreciated that, thank you for staying with us. But no, I was a youth pastor, and I met Nick at the Baptist College of Florida, where actually you and me, Jay, graduated, as well as Nick.
Go
but
Eagles.
He was in college. Yeah, he was in college. I saw him singing at one of the what do you call the day where you bring high schoolers to the college?
Bring a friend day.
Preview day. And Nick was leading worship, and him and me and Cassidy connected. And then he started coming out and volunteering at our youth group and our church for, I don't know, a few years. He even lived with us for a summer. And Nick can tell you a lot about that. What's it like to live with a younger Josh and Cassidy in our marriage?
Wow, there's a whole nother podcast.
There's a lot here. I even helped do his wedding. I even helped do his wedding.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you said Eagles. He said Eagles,
back.
And I think that was right as I was leaving. There was the big Eagle charge. I don't think I understood that, but man, you guys do go way back. That's awesome.
Way back.
We do. And Nick's got a great heart. If you don't know Nick, he's an incredible worship leader, loves the Lord. He's the real deal. And has been a faithful friend for many years and has an incredible story. I hope you'll kind of share a little bit of that today, Nick, for everyone listening. But we're glad you're here. We really wanted to pick your brain and get to know your heart on really talking today about missional living and what does it look like to live on mission and what you're learning in your journey. And really, this whole podcast is about, pastors and leaders just being transparent and talking about what we're learning. And what me and Jay love doing is not only discussing with each other, but learning from friends like you that what is God teaching you, and we'll just kind of walk through that. So tell us a little bit about your family, and then just your call to ministry and how it brought you to today.
Yeah. So my name is Nick again. My wife's name is Natalie, and we have 2 boys, Ezra and Abram, and we've been at Mercy Hill Church in Yulee, Florida, again for 6.5 years. Grateful to be here, doing the missions and worship. It's kind of like a dream job for me in the sense if you had ambitions and thoughts of when you're trying to figure out what's God calling you to and what is he stirring. And so since being here, I've learned a lot when it comes to worship, but I think even more so about the idea of missions and being on mission. And so, yeah, I came to faith at 17 years old, and then immediately didn't know what I was going to do. I thought I was going to travel the world and be a culinary chef, and I wanted to do specifically seafood. And so, who would have thought that I would have instead not had been smart enough and went to Bible college. So BCF was my saving grace there. But yeah, went into Bible college and really fought through even there. What is God calling me to? I started as a music major, and then I wanted to learn the why behind what we do. And so I switched it to more of a ministry theology study, and graduated there a year after my wife and I got married. So I was in college. We had a newborn, and we're graduating. And so my wife Natalie didn't even get to see me walk across the stage because our youngest was just our oldest now was just a mess. So yeah, and from there, even after that graduation, I'd moved to High Springs, Florida, where I was a student pastor, and just really wrestled still, like, God, what are you doing? I know you've gifted me in this way, and I have a heart for the world, and I just was called to be faithful in that time. And I had a friend of mine at one time during the wrestling of, Lord, are you calling me to something next in ministry? He just said, be 100% until you're not. And I was like, that's really lame advice. Like, I wanted like you to give me this big esoteric thing, but it was simply be 100% there until you're not. And so yeah, we began to pray, and the Lord opened opportunity for us to come to Yulee. Before that, actually, I don't know if Josh remembers this, we had been praying about church planting right in this area. And so it was crazy. I might share a little bit about this later, but those desires that we had to be in this area, the Lord put it also in Josh's heart, Josh and Cassidy's heart. And who would have thought the previous church you were at was literally a stone throw away from where I'm at currently. So we had these desires for this specific area. We're praying together. I've met with people about church planning, and the Lord had other plans, but the desires came to fruition. And I was so grateful for that.
What God has done in you and what he's currently doing through you. And so that's it's really exciting. Today, we're going to be talking about missional engagement specifically. And I'm a big person. I know Josh and I both talk about this a lot. We like to define terms.
Yeah.
And so really, when we're going to talk about missional engagement and, how you really have seen that come out in your life and how you've walked through that, let's start with defining that term of when you say missional engagement, what do you mean?
Yeah.
What are you talking about when you say missional engagement? I think it's important that we just all on the same, page when it comes to what you're actually talking about. So share with us a little bit about, define that term for us so that we're all on the same page.
Yeah. I think missional living and its semantics, especially when you hear from church. So if you've ever been in church, or if you're, as a pastor or somebody that just might be listening, you've heard missions, and the first thought you might think is some poor hut in Africa sweeping the floor with a broom made out of twigs, and it's romanticized. And there is a call that is great, and it's a sacrifice for a lot of people. But when I say missional living, it's understanding the commandment of Christ, discerning, meaning helping to try to figure out and understand what does this look like to be missional, and then answering those calls. And so I think understanding Christ's commandment is going to be important for us to go, therefore, make disciples of all nations, Matthew 28. But then also, teaching them to obey and observe all that he's commanded us to do. And so, there's this really, excuse my French, but sexy view of missions. And it's really ordinary in the day to day, if that lens and that term is defined that way.
So is sexy really a French word?
Sexy, but yeah.
I didn't know if it was French or not. Like that's I've never heard it. I didn't know what was going to happen when he said, "Excuse my French." I was like, "Hey, I can't click the box that says this is for kids this time."
That's right. That's right.
But
I will. Now, I've been on many mission trips with Nick over the years. We've been to Costa Rica. We've been to Cairo, Egypt, and Nick is incredible, like on every trip. But like in Egypt, it was just fascinating. We learned so much. We rode camels. We went on the Nile River. I still look back to that trip as super powerful, and to see the church, churches planting churches, like wanting to plant churches in the Gaza Strip, and seeing the abuse and the persecution of the church there. Of course, people thought Nick was a sheik as we walked around Cairo. And I told them I was your servant.
Yeah.
I told them I was your servant.
Yeah, they stopped
Remember
us.
that?
That guy, we're walking up the stairs, and he stopped us, and he kissed my hand, and he called me Sheik, and because Josh kind of like he was a giant among these people, and they thought that he was my German bodyguard. So
I had a long beard
and the
at
guy,
that time,
remember,
and it was like all red, and I looked like
yeah,
so out of place. But people would look at me and then look at Nick and be like, "Sheik?" And I'd say, "Oh, yes, yes." And I would like walk
yeah,
behind you, like real solemn, like whatever you need, I'm here.
yeah. And we went on the Nile on the holy day, and the guy was like, "What are you doing out here? You're just being the temple. Like, what's going on?"
Yeah, yeah.
So
So
that
it
was
was
good
really
times.
cool
Good times.
experience. But yeah, but I agree that missions sometimes is viewed as it's a certain place. It's a certain type of person. And yes, like you said, there are people that have a specific call to a country, a place, or a tribe. And we have some in our church that we partner with that are literally writing scripture in their language, and they are planting churches and equipping. And that is an amazing thing to be a part of. But what is the day-to-day on mission? Because there's sometimes a disconnect. I think people think, well, that's what missionaries do. But for us that are in America, we just, we go to church, and we maybe invite someone to church, and maybe we talk about Jesus a little bit. Or maybe we give an invite card out at Christmas. Is that what we're talking about? Are we talking about those are the super Christians, and then just the regular Christians? We're not really good at that, and that scares us. And typically we think, well, missions means I have to go to a country I don't want to go to. I know those are really bad examples, but sometimes that seeps into the church, and we wonder why more people don't live out their faith every day. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it is. It's the same type of sacrifice, right? When you say, okay, Lord, I am committing to live a life of mission. You are sacrificing things. You're sacrificing comfort. You're sacrificing even moments. Going to the store. Hey, I'm here. I'm here to shop for milk and eggs and bread. That's all I want to get. And you beeline to the egg, area that get them eggs. You get them milk. You get to the bread area, and you start to see people, and less of your task list. And you start to really be able to see and say, Lord, who do I need to talk to in here today? And then after you talk with them, then you go and you frequent the cashier. My wife Natalie, she does this really well. She has two cashiers that she goes to specifically in order to build relationship and talk about Christ. And this most recent time, she began to have that conversation when she was at the store, and it just opened up some new gospel centered conversations about the Lord, about His grace, about His mercy, about what He's done in her life, and it is taking that perspective of, okay, it's not just Christmas cards or baked goods for somebody in the hospital. It is saying, okay, Lord, today, how will you use me today? And I'm at the house, and there's my dog. So.
I turned my mute off. I turned mute on. So, Nick, I'd love to hear a little bit more, lean in a little bit more, because I know you have probably tons of opportunities to live missionally. And I agree with what Josh says. I think sometimes we have this disconnect between, missions being something we do versus something how we live. There shouldn't be that disconnect. And I'm a firm believer that I don't think we'll ever understand missions on foreign soil until we understand missions in our backyard. And if that's the case, what does missions in our backyard look like? So could you lean into that a little bit more? Like, okay, what does it
Yeah.
practically look like? Yeah, you gave us one example, great, about going to the store. But walk us through a little bit more about, like, if you were to talking to some people at your church, going, hey, I really want you to live on mission every day of your life. What examples would you give them of what that looks like?
Yeah, when it comes to living missionally in our own backyard, I think that I was really challenged. One day, I was at one of the local spots here in town, And I saw one of the pastors that he's been at his church for over 25 years. He served faithfully, and he was bussing tables. And I was like, bro, what you doing? And he was like, I'm here. I'm here on Thursday nights. This is what I do. And he said, because I've been preaching to my people to live a missional life. He said, my job, our job as pastors, they open us up to opportunities just because we say, hey, I'm a pastor at this church doing a thing. So either conversations happen quickly about God and spirituality, or they get shut down quickly on both sides. And he said, in this position, I'm a servant and I'm able to, wipe tables off and take people's trays and get into conversations that me as a pastor, I don't know if I can. So I'm not telling everybody, hey, go work busting tables. But, I've even, seen things online with Josh coaching within his community and us really being engaged, not for church sake, right? Not for, hey, this is, the Bridge Church doing this thing for you guys. It's no, hey, this is me as a Christ follower being engaged. And so I took kind of that same role, and I said, you know what? I love the photography side of things, creative itches being scratched. And I've had so many conversations, and I don't tell them I'm a pastor. They just know me as Nick Carter, as the photographer, and then we get into conversations. And most recently, I've had a really great connection with a repeat family, which is also good. A repeat family where they had asked us about, they were doing a maternity session, and my wife, she had a miscarriage back in March, and our due dates were the same week. And so she asked me, she's like, how are you guys doing with that? What's going on? And I was able to allow, even my ordinary personal things for the Lord to use and get into a gospel-centered conversation where I talked about God's mercy and his grace and his love for me. And then, had the opportunity to pray over them. And, anytime that's happened, it's been really encouraging to say, okay, and challenging for others to say, hey, look, I know that you're like Nick, the pastor, but, I see you as Nick, the photographer, or Nick, the coach, or Nick, the, here, ultimately trying to bridge that gap in our own backyard. Because my wife and I, we were talking about before the pandemic of going on the field. And, so I said, Lord, our desires were Southeast Asia, and we have some great connections there. She's been there before. I've been there before. And so the desire was there. So I heard from one of my missions professors, like you said, Josh, earlier, or maybe it was Jim, so sorry, that, hey, if you're not doing it here, you can't do it across the pond or, across the sea. And so that's in my own backyard, it's saying, okay, I'm using every opportunity for the sake of the gospel.
That's powerful. And I think it's like, how do we teach and not, like you're saying, not only teach, but model. And you gave great examples, right? Whether it's your photography, I love coaching my kids. And of course, Jay, you do that too. So many conversations, so many families I've met. I usually don't tell them I'm a pastor, right away. Sometimes people know, or a friend tells them, and then they start acting weird. Or they just look at me strange, or they go, pastors like basketball, or, it's just interesting. People's perspectives are like on ministry or leaders and stuff like that, which is hilarious to me. But I think the more genuine we are, and the more just meeting people where they're at, breaks down all those awkward religious bubbles or just perspectives that people have about people that go to church, and whether they experience Christ or they experience just judgmental spirit, or just really strange the way people talk or even communicate about church or about the gospel. And so for me, it's like, how do I continue to try my best to model that, but what do we tell our people? Like, how do we teach them? How do we develop this culture where it's not just something that a few do, but the whole church understands that as you go about baseball, as you go, right? That's the whole idea of go make disciples. As you are going, how do we emphasize that, or even help that become a movement where it's not just something that we talk about as like a programmatic mindset, but as a lifestyle? Because I think that's what we're really talking about today. How does this become not just something I do in Southeast Asia, if God calls me there, but I do every day? And it's convicting, because it really does ask us the question, are we living on mission? And I think for a lot of the parents here and the people that I know here, it's not teaching them to add more programs to their life, which is typically what church does. Oh, we need to add 5 more programs. But instead, as you coach, as you're on vacation, here's ways you can live out the gospel and help people find and follow Jesus. So that's really, it's foundational. This isn't rocket science, but how do we help our people do that? What do you do in your church, or what are you trying to do, Nick, to really build that heartbeat?
Yeah, like you said, there are moments of people saying, well, why don't we have our Tuesday night visitations? I mean, if you grew up, church model, 20 years ago, it was, hey, Tuesday night visitations, Wednesday night church, Thursday night revisitations, and so those have worked and have been effective, and sometimes, but it's another checklist. I feel it's another thing, and so what I try to encourage our folks here, in Yulee, is to ask the Lord to give you the desire. Ask him to for you to really be broken over the people that you come in contact with, and that you have such a. I always use this analogy. I'm like, we give people candy coated Tylenol for their cancer diagnosis, when we are just kind of lackadaisical in our relationships, and how, and so my heartbeat isn't to guilt, because I don't want folks to do anything out of guilt or because I said so. I want it to be where the Lord begins to stir in their heart and says, hey, you have been called to this place for such a time as this, whether you're a nurse or a barista or whatever you do all for the glory of God, First Corinthians would say. And so you have this tension, where you're like, okay. And so we have some, classes that help equip and train and all those things, but in the ordinary, it's saying, okay, it's those real conversations. It's that when a friend comes over, they're sharing, or we're sharing, hey, I talked to this person about the gospel, and it's letting it be a part of who you are, like you said, not just what you do. You become a person where I was recently had the opportunity to deliver some food to one of the schools, just trying to again connect that with our community and make much of Christ. And I was wearing some white pants that day, and when I picked up the Christian chicken, God, holy blessed chicken that morning from Chick-fil-A, sponsor them. I'd gotten the coffee and it spilled all over my pants, and so I got up my truck, and I know the vice principal of the school there, and he was like, "Hey, looks like you got some coffee for us." And I was like, "How'd you know?" He goes, "I can see it all over your britches," and that's how they say pants here in Yulee, Florida, all over your britches. And
Over britches,
and
on my
so
britches.
all my britches, yeah, and I just thought, as we live missionally, when we begin to share about Christ, people are going to say, I already knew you were going to bring me that. I already knew you were going to talk to me about the Lord. Whether it's say, hey, I already knew, or it's say, hey, I already knew, come tell me more about this Christ that you so talk about, and like your life looks like it really, there's like the scripture would say, there's a fragrance within us of Christ likeness, where people are saying, hey, and I had coffee, but in this, bridge to that would be, as we're patient with folks as we go, and standing in a line at a gas station, getting some, candies for our kiddos, where, the thing goes down, their machine goes down, and you're just like, all right, cool. And you look at the room, you say, Lord, you've placed me for such a time as this. How can I make much of you? Ordinarily, you're, and then, but there is that tension of, okay, Lord, I've, maybe for somebody, I've done this here, I've done the missional living here, but I do feel a call into the nations. And so that's where the further equipping happens. But we have to be people, and as pastors, really seeing those people and saying, hey, wow, like you guys are doing the thing. And is God stirring your heart either to, missions, or to begin something within your workplace of a Bible study? Like, how can I come alongside you, and as a pastor, do my biblical obligation to equip you for the work of the ministry, in that? And so I've been so excited just to see different people doing Bible studies in their coffee shop, within their one of them does nursing, and they have a little study, and they say, hey, if you can come if you want to. This isn't anything, weird. I just want to invite you. And that's the other thing. Don't be weird. Don't be weird. So
Don't be weird.
Don't be weird. That's great. Hey, I'm listening to this, and I'm getting really, really pumped up. And a couple things have been just, we've gone back to the Great Commission, go and make disciples. As you're going, make disciples. And I was with a church planner this morning, and I think this is fascinating. It all fits together. I was with a church planner this morning, and they were telling me how excited they were about being in their community, living on mission, serving the community, things of that sort. And then there's this tension to where, like, hey, but I've also got to get, Sunday morning church things going on, and things of that sort. Now, I'm not underestimating Sunday morning church gatherings. I think we're commanded, we should gather, we should worship together. But I told him, I said, look, here's the one thing you have going for you as a church plant that no other church in your community probably has. You're writing the DNA of that church. Now I'm thinking about this. What was the DNA of the early church? What was the DNA Jesus commanded us to live out? What was it? Go and make disciples. As you're going in life, make disciples. We have kind of shifted that, and church has grown up into this big organization to where now we've rewritten it and it says, go, and as you're going, invite people to church versus make disciples. We've almost taken the ownership out of it, that we no longer own it anymore. We just push people towards the church versus owning our responsibility. That's what I'm hearing. And it's just fascinating. The fact that, like, yeah, you're right. We have this responsibility, this ownership that we're supposed to have. And in some ways we've missed it. And so I'd love your expertise here, perhaps, Nick. What would you suggest is maybe some of the greatest hindrances, the things that get in the way of believers doing this very thing that we're talking about? We see it in scripture. We talk about it as pastors. You see all these things. We know what we know, but practically, what are the things that step in the way? And I think identifying these things are important. What are the things that step in the way of us actually doing it from your perspective?
Yeah. You said it perfectly about the, hey, Jesus said, hey, go, and it just happened, right? And you see the church spread all across the world, the gospel spread across the world, believers coming to faith in Christ, or people coming to faith in Christ and becoming believers. The other day, a guy called me. He's like, hey, Nick, I have a question. This lady, she's needing money for a couch. She just got, her husband left her and she's got her own apartment. Do you think it's okay if I give her money for this couch? And I'm like, you don't need my permission. Like you don't need my permission, or if you need me to come over to help you take it over there, absolutely, I'm all ears. I'm emotional, but I can help with those things. But I think a hindrance is the person that they look in the mirror every single day. And now there is some with workplaces, and there's some things you can't discuss. Like you can't, in some places you go, hey, yeah, I can't talk about Christ here, or my job will be taken away from me. And so there's a wisdom of like, okay, how do I, there's that old saying, I don't agree with it. It says, hey, preach the gospel if necessary, use words. I'm not a guy that believes in that. I'm a guy that would say, preach the gospel, and with your life make much of Christ. And it's an easy thing, because it's like, hey, well, I love well, I serve well, I give a lot of money. And this is what happens with people that come to our congregation sometimes. I say "are" in the sense of the global church. They say, well, I give, I serve, I've wiped a baby's butt this week in the nursery. I'm good. And so I'm living out a life of the gospel. And I'm like, yeah, yes and no, in the sense of, yes, you are practicing Christian habits of hospitality and of servitude and of humility. But you must share. We've been called. And I mean, you see all throughout the scriptures where it's, you must speak. You must use the most powerful thing we have, the tongue, to proclaim the gospel, and in every facet. And so I think it's fear sometimes of will this person, will this coworker still like me, or even even closer, will my spouse, will they still love me if they hear me share the gospel with them, or my cousin, or my brother, or my sister. And so I think it's a little bit of fear, but it's I would say fear is the biggest hindrance. A fear of rejection, a fear of isolation, of being isolated. I remember coming to faith in Christ at 17. We had this big hangout park in my hometown, and I was fresh off the press. Heaven had just got finished cleaning up the party for me, kind of deal. And I walk in, and I say, I was like telling all my friends, like, look, Jesus changed my life. Like, he has given me a new life. And in that one year that I was going into my senior year of high school, every single one of those people dropped me. And it was lonely in some areas. And it was kind of depressing in a lot of ways, because I was like, Lord, like, and it wasn't even one thing I had to hate them and get them out of my life. It was like they hated me and pushed me out. And the Lord was just so gracious, for our senior superlatives in high school. I was voted most changed, and I say that not to be like, oh, look at me, but it was one of those things where the Lord really saw, or the school saw what the Lord did in my life. My brother and I, we began to share the gospel, and we had 300 kids come into worship club. And so at an early time in my faith, I had the privilege to be able to be under someone that pushed me to missional living, that said, hey, your
Mm.
friends are too lost for you to be quiet.
Mhm.
And as people that might be listening to it, your coworkers are too lost for you to be quiet. You can be kind and gentle and loving, and those are, there also are scriptures where you see, hey, do these good works so others may glorify your Father in heaven.
Mhm.
And so you're like, okay, Lord, there's that tension, but I think we lean on the side of really good humanitarian efforts, and less, human for the soul. There's a God that
Mm.
loves you and desires relationship with you, and
Mhm.
and so yeah, I would say fear is a huge, huge hindrance in many facets.
I think that's so good, Nick. I going back to what we talked about, the tension, right, between go to church, be the church.
Mm,
The idea of we are to go about our lives and make disciples, right? We all agree.
mm,
Nobody I've met in church disagrees with that.
yeah.
But at the same time, there's almost a pendulum swing, right? You go back 20 years, it was the huge, they call it the church growth movement, where it's all about creating this experience where you invite everybody on Sunday. And then the
Mm,
quote unquote professional Christians, the pastors, will explain the gospel to you. They'll figure out all the things you need. I just need to get you there. And
mm,
then there's been a huge shift the last, I don't know, 5-10 years, where the word missional has become like the new hot word. It's like,
yeah.
I'm not even sure it's a real word. We've created this word, right? And it's
Mhm,
a great word because it brings us to the heart of the mission of Christ. And I believe it's both. I don't think there is a biblical precedent that says we should just go and tell, and Sunday morning should just be, just for believers only. There's some churches that believe that. I believe the church is the believers gathered together, but I believe the church is most healthy when the believers are gathered around the mission. And
mm,
throughout Jesus' ministry, there was come and see moments, but there's also go and tell. And I think they both
yeah.
work well together. I think that our churches should be safe places to bring friends and build in community and ask questions and feel the love. But also at the same point, we should be equipped and go out to the ball fields, to these places wherever God has you, to
Yeah.
share and show the love of Christ. And so it's like you said, it's modeling it, but it's also opening our mouths and saying, hey, can I tell you
Mm,
how Jesus has changed my life? Is there
yeah.
anything I can pray for you about? I hear that you're going through a difficult time in your life. We're getting
Mm,
ready to we're getting ready to order our food. We're actually getting ready to pray. Can we pray for you? Just those moments,
mhm,
God shows up. And so
yeah.
that's something I've really wrestled with. Just what I just shared was this extremism that I've actually been at
Mm,
churches where they picked one. And
yeah.
and I found that a lot of church planners, Jay, and you could speak into this, have chosen the only missional route. And they say, well, we're not, Sunday morning, we're not going to put any energy into that hardly. We're just going to hang out at Starbucks, and we're just going to just walk around, and we're going to just talk to people. And yes, do that. Um, but the gathering of the body, building teams, building small groups is equally as important, because we should be excited to invite people into the church family. And I know that's not what you guys you're not saying, but I
Yeah.
do think for those listening, I could have heard some of it today and go, well, I guess that doesn't matter then. I don't even have to go to church then.
Mm,
I mean,
yeah.
really, I don't even need the church. I'm just going to share my faith and just hang out. And so
Mm,
um, I just want to kind of throw that curveball today, because I do
Well,
think
I
that's a
yeah.
I don't
big
Yeah.
think I
argument.
don't think you're
Like, I
wrong.
literally was at a church planner conference, and literally I had a pastor friend like literally say about another pastor across the room, like, oh, he went missional. And I was like,
Mm,
what
yeah.
does that mean? Like, oh, he went
What you
missional.
saying?
And then the other guys around the circle were like, oh, Oh, he did. Okay. And it was like this weird, awkward moment. I'm, of course, like younger, and I'm thinking, what are they even talking about? And what they meant was, he's not an attractional church anymore. He just is missional. So, but we are. And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
why do we
Yeah.
choose? You
So
know, it really bugged me.
A missional church is an attractional church, because if you're living on mission, it's going to attract. It's going to be
Oh,
attraction.
yeah.
People are going to be
Agreed.
attracted to it because it's living out the way God called us to live. We're attracted, whether we like it or not. We're attracted to the design, the natural design that God created for us. That's
There
what
you
we're
go.
drawn to. We were created for that. That's in our DNA of our creation. The reason why we don't do that is because we also have a human selfish nature where we want to do it ourselves, right? This is the tension every person lives towards. Paul, when he's writing about communion, says, hey, don't take this in an unworthy manner. Why? Because you're going to cause somebody to stumble. Well, you're probably going to cause people to stumble, the ones that are not believers. They're there. They exist. I think you're absolutely right. We're not at all trying to paint the picture that the church is not important. We're supposed to gather. We're supposed to worship. I believe church is the exclamation point after a week long of living on mission. It's the exclamation point. So we get to go celebrate what God has done and what God is doing. And Lord willing, those people that we've been on mission and speaking to and speaking into their lives are with us side by side in worship, because their lives have been transformed because we're living on mission. So the two go hand in hand. It's not one or the other, Josh. You're absolutely right. So great.
And,
it was
from that,
great addition.
Yeah. And from that, the opportunities that I've had within the, personally in the missional living, it's been one of those things where people have come. I'm like, hey, I have a seat for you this Sunday. Come see me. And there's this one guy. He owns one of the newest shops in town, and he's sat with me many a Sunday, and continues to not want to fall after Christ, but in those moments of crisis. I'm the first person he calls, because there's something that, there's a trust that's been built by being faithful in that speaking, where he'd say, hey, I'll come sit with you. Oh yeah, absolutely. That whatever you've got, it must be real. And I want to see, like Jay said, it should be like, whoa. And not a come and see, but I trust it. I trust what this is. I trust you enough to trust what this is. So.
This is good stuff. We could go on and on about the conversation about, and I hope somebody looks at me and classifies me as, oh, you've gone missional. I hope somebody says that about me. I really do.
That might be a whole other podcast, but that memory came back, man. It came back after y'all were talking. Hey. I'm like, I still remember that day. I'm standing in Orlando at Exponential Conference, and these, I mean, like a couple, and I still highly respect all of these guys. But it was such an odd moment for me. I was like, what is happening? I don't know what these terms, I didn't even know what the terms meant, at that age. I was like, maybe like 25, 26. I'm like, what is this new word? Like, I thought everybody was on mission.
That is like you're I'm getting a little upset about that comment, because I'm like,
I don't mean to drop the grenade. I literally dropped the grenade.
It's this idea that, like, I think as churches grow, if they're not intentional, they're gonna actually, they probably won't be as missional, because they'll turn into an organization that is running a church versus hey, there's this scalable mentality that needs to happen, to where you never lose the mission side. You just scale it differently based off of the size of your church.
Teams. Yeah. And
so
you just
3,000 member church is still missional. It just looks different than the 100 member church.
And that's not fair to judge that church based on how large or small or whatever, but it was a mentality thing. It was using these phrases to kind of go, well, it wasn't even really judgment. It was just kind of like, like he's kind of shifted his heart to be not as focused at this as he is during the week. And I'm saying, I think most people probably in America, if they are believers and they're somewhat growing, they're going to know they should go to church. Does that mean they go? The percentages tell you they're way down by how many times they attend every Sunday during the month. But what I would say, like you guys have said the whole time, and I 100% agree, the struggle is most people are not living missionally, or they just don't know how, or they've never seen it modeled, or they just are afraid of what they're going to, well, I not know what to say. What if I don't have the right answers? It's all those kind of reasons that you said, Nick, was fear. And we tend to fear people and fear what people think. And that really does, like you said, keep us from living on mission, because the worst thing that could happen in our today's culture, I feel like for a lot of people, is just to be canceled, to be ridiculed, to be mocked, or to be cut out. Like you were in high school, all your friends said, "Oh, you're a Christian? All right, we're done with you." Right? That's not real friends. That's called fake friends. But in high school, I mean, friends are everything to some kids, but God gave you grace to move on, and that's awesome.
Listen, this has been a great conversation. We probably need to have a plan too. I need to go cool off because I'm a little worked up. I'm like, my wife and I just had a conversation today about like, all right, it's time to get the ground rolling here. How are we going to get people in our neighborhood on our driveway so that we can eventually get them in our house so we can, begin to build these relationships? Because we just moved here 2 months ago, but like after 2 months, I'm like, all right, I need to get somebody in my backyard to talk to them and hang out with them around the barbecue. Barbecue is missional.
That's right.
Missional living. Barbecue is missional living.
That'll preach right there.
Nick wants some of my barbecue. That's okay, Nick.
I do.
You can come down anytime you want. I ain't driving no more. I ain't driving no more though. I refuse to drive. Anyhow, listen, fun, great conversation. And listen, I think there needs to be a part 2 and get Nick back on the podcast here. We can continue this conversation about missional living. But Nick, thanks so much for coming and stirring the pot and getting us all riled up. I enjoy it, getting us all flustered. Listen, I hope you're listening today and that you are somewhat a little flustered. We all should be when we start talking about missional, and it should hit a nerve like, hey, we need to be on mission. We should be on mission. We should be going about our everyday in the workplace, in the grocery store, at the restaurants, in our neighborhood, on the ball fields, wherever we are. We should be on mission, understanding that we've been called to do this. This is our primary calling. This is who God called us to. This is our instructions. And yes, get to church and celebrate that with other believers, because when you walk out of church, you're encouraged, you're excited because you're ready to take on the week. And when you get back to church, it's an exclamation point because you're celebrating all that God's done. It's a big circle, the circle of life. But listen, Nick, thanks so much for being here. Josh, as always, I'm grateful to hang out with you and learn from our friend Nick. And so listen, from all of us here at the Pastor Pod, thank you for another time, another conversation. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you back next week.